It's been a grim week for the people of the Philippines as they count the cost of the devastation wrought by Typhoon Haiyan. HMS Daring has just arrived near the worst hit parts of the islands. It's part of Britain's contribution to the aid effort there. It's been one of the worst natural disasters in the history of the Philippines. Typhoon Haiyan hit the country 9 days ago, leaving devastation in its wake. The numbers involved are shocking. So far, the official death toll is over 3,600 people, with many thousands more unaccounted for. More than 500,000 people have lost their homes, and the UN estimates 11 million have been affected. David Cameron announced on Friday that the UK government is to give an extra £30 million in aid, taking the total British figure to £50 million. An RAF C-17 aircraft landed yesterday with equipment to help aid workers get to hard-to-reach areas. And helicopter carrier HMS Illustrious is on its way and due to arrive next weekend. The British public have once again dipped into their pockets and given generously. So far, they've given more than £30 million to the Disasters Emergency Committee. And the International Development Secretary, Justine Greening, joins me now for the Sunday interview. Good morning, Secretary of State. How much of the £50 million that the government's allocated has got through so far?
Well, all of it's landed on the ground now. If you've seen HMS Daring's turned up, that will be able to start getting help out to some of those more outlying islands that have been quite hard to reach. We've seen Save the Children and also Oxfam now really being able to get aid out on the ground. And in fact, we have a plane taking off later today that won't just be carrying out more DFID equipment to help clear the roads and more humanitarian supplies. We'll also have their stuff on board too.
But we've got £50 million worth of aid actually on the ground in the Philippines?
Well, when the crisis hit, we instantly chartered a number of flights directly from Dubai, where we have pre-positioned humanitarian supplies, and then also started preparatory work to make sure we could get some of that debris clearing equipment, bulldozers, forklift trucks, cutting equipment, the sort of 4x4s you need to get around in that kind of terrain out there. And a lot of that has now arrived. So I think we have done a huge amount so far. We've gone beyond just providing humanitarian supplies, as I said, to getting the Royal Air Force involved. They've helped us get some of that equipment out there quickly. We've got HMS Illustrious, obviously, sailing over there now.
Why is that taking so long? That was based in the Gulf, and yet it's not going to get there until 2 weeks after the storm first hit, and that's the one ship we have with lots of helicopters.
Well, the first decision we took was to make sure that we could get the fastest vessel out there that was able to help HMS Daring. HMS Illustrious was actually just finishing an exercise and planning to start to head back towards the UK, and in fact what we've done is said to not do that, and in fact then diverted it.
But shouldn't we have got it out more quickly?
Well, we took all the decisions as fast as we were able to. Of course, you can't just literally in hours turn a big warship round like the Illustrious, but we did make sure we took those decisions, and that's why it will be taking over from Daring. And of course it's why HMS Daring is already there, and that will be able to provide some really key vital humanitarian support and expertise that hasn't been there so far.
Well, hasn't it? I mean, it's the US Navy's doing the heavy lifting here. I mean, the US Navy had the USS Washington. Now there is an aircraft carrier, 80 planes, 5,000 personnel, and they've got the fleet there as well. They're doing the real... We're obviously helping, but it's the Americans are taking the lead here.
It's a big international effort, and you're right. Countries like the US and the UK that have a broader ability to support that goes beyond simply core humanitarian supplies have absolutely made sure that we've brought our logistics knowledge alongside the US. We've sent out our naval vessels, and I think what it shows is that we're working across government to respond to this crisis.
Why does only 4% of your international aid budget, just over 4%, go on emergency aid and disaster response?
Well, of course, a lot of it depends on what crises hit in any given year. A lot of people will know we've done a huge amount of work responding to the crisis in Syria, the conflict there, and the fact that we now have 2 million refugees who fled the country that we are part of an international effort in supporting.
Shouldn't we be giving more money to that, though, rather than some of the other programs that are harder to see the results? I mean, if we were to give more to the refugees in the Syrian camps, for example, which are crying out for aid at the moment, they've still not got enough, that would be a visible result. We could see an improvement of lives, of children, men, women being saved.
And of course, what we need to do, though, is alongside that, try and stop those situations from happening in the first place. A lot of our development spend is helping countries to stay stable. Look at some of the work that we're doing, for example, in Somalia, much more sensible, not just from an immigration, but from a terrorism threat perspective, to work with countries to keep them stable. And then, of course, the other aspect.
But there's a lot of terrorism coming from Somalia at the moment. You only have to look at Kenya recently to see that.
Which is precisely why you talk about what we do with the rest of the spend. It's precisely why it's sensible to work with the government of Somalia to try and help it keep stability on the ground.
Let me just clarify. Should we give a bigger part of your budget to disaster relief or not?
I think we get it about right, actually.
Okay.
I think we have to be flexible, and we are. And you've seen us add on this Philippine relief on top of the work that we're doing in Syria.
Where can you show me a correlation between us giving aid to some failed nation or nearly failed nation and that cutting down on terrorism?
I think if you look at the work that we've done, for example, in Pakistan, a huge amount of work, some of it short term.
But it's riven by terrorism, Pakistan.
And that's not going to fix itself, in a sense. So what we need to do and what we are doing is working with the Pakistan government. And actually some of the programs we have there are much longer term in nature. So look at the work that we do investing in education, precisely the kind of things that little girls like Malala talk about being absolutely key if we're going to fundamentally tackle some of the root causes of instability and terrorism in the first place.
You mentioned Pakistan. We are ramping up our aid to Pakistan. It'll soon be close to £500 million by the time of the election. Why should we, or our British taxpayers, being given £500 million to a country when only 0.5% of people in Pakistan even pay income tax, and 70% of their own MPs don't even pay income tax?
I think that's a really good point, Andrew, and it's one of the reasons why we've got agreement with the new Pakistan government to work directly with their tax revenue authority, help them increase their capability and help them push forward that tax reform, which is actually a key part of the IMF programme that's now been agreed for Pakistan. You're absolutely right. And in fact, one of the things I've done in this role is set up a joint DFID and HMRC team that will go out and work with many of these countries so that they can raise their own revenues as their economies are growing.
You really think you're going to raise the amount of tax by sending out the British HMRC?
If you look at the work that we've done in Afghanistan, we've seen tax revenues raised from $200 million several years ago to now over $2 billion.
How many troops are we sending out to protect them?
They don't need troops. What we do is make sure that alongside all our Foreign Office staff, we have a duty of care. But it makes sense to respond to humanitarian crises like the Philippines, work with countries to stop them from becoming unstable, and then you're right, absolutely, as their economies grow, work with them to make sure that they have tax authorities that can then reap the rewards and reinvest in their own public services.
If the rich in Pakistan don't start paying taxes, will we stop the aid?
I think we will need to look at whether we can keep on funding when a country domestically isn't doing everything it can. But I want to be clear, the Pakistan government, the new Pakistan government has been very clear this is a priority for it, and we're going to support them in pursuing that and increasing their own tax take from their own people.
All right. Let me show you this picture. Yeah, up here, see if you're... Now, can you tell us, who are these young women?
I don't know. I'm sure you're about to tell me, though.
Oh, I will. They are the Ethiopian Spice Girls. And I'm surprised that you don't know, because they've only managed to get like that and become rather famous because we've financed them, your department's financed them to the tune of £4 million.
And of course, all the work that we do with girls and women on the ground, making sure that they have a voice in their local communities, that they get the chance to have a livelihood and employment, that they have some control over what happens to their own bodies in terms of tackling FGM, tackling the fact that there's huge issues
FGM
around female genital mutilation.
Did you know that your department had spent £4 million on the Ethiopian Spice Girls?
Yes, I do. And actually, I think ultimately, if we're going to see change on the ground, we have to work with that next generation of girls who are growing up in these countries.
£4 million?
And show them that actually there is a life ahead of them with opportunity, with potential, that goes beyond what many of them will experience, which includes early and forced marriage. It's part of the work that we do, Andrew, and it's part of the work that we do with local communities to try and change attitudes and help create the potential for growth.
But first of all, that's unmeasurable, everything you've just said. And secondly, they broadcast on a radio station that doesn't reach most of the country. So they can't have the impact. They broadcast in a station which only reaches 20 million out of the 80 million people. And the Girl Hub project has been condemned by the Independent Commission for Aid Impact, saying there were serious deficiencies and an unacceptable lack of child protection policies.
Well, I think that aid report was actually done a while ago now, and in fact it was talking about the project when it first got going, and a lot of improvements have happened since. But I think I'd go back to the point I made earlier on. We're working in very difficult environments often, where we are trying to get longer term change on the ground.
Okay.
And that means working directly with communities, but it also means investing for the long term, investing in particularly some of these girls to start changing attitudes of not just them but their communities. And I think that's a sensible approach to take.
As I say, though, very hard ever to measure. Why does the British taxpayer spend £5 million on a Bangladeshi version of Question Time?
Well, we work with actually people like the BBC to make sure that we can get accountability for local communities of their government.
£5 million, but that's bigger than the BBC Question Time's budget, and that even includes the cost of the tattoo on Mr. Dimbleby.
I don't.
Why £5 million on a Bangladeshi Question Time? It's our money.
It's our money, and ultimately we are working with people and with countries on the ground to not just improve their economies, and we're doing more of that over time, more job creation. We're also working to improve people's prospects, but also critically we're working to improve their ability to hold their governments to account, so that when they are not getting services on the ground, they have channels and ways that they can raise those concerns with the people who are there to be delivering services for them and who are there to represent them in their government.
In your own personal view, should the next Conservative government, if there is one, should you continue to ring-fence spending on foreign aid?
Yes, I think we should. But I think it's critical that if we're going to spend 0.7% of our national income, we make sure it is in 100% of our national interest. And that means having a clear approach on humanitarian responses, a clear approach working to keep countries safe, so that in doing so we can keep ourselves safer. And it means a clear approach on helping drive economic development and jobs, so that there's a long-term end of aid dependency.
Do you believe in enshrining the percentage of our GDP, 0.7, that goes on foreign aid, in law?
Yes, and that's a coalition agreement.
Yeah, but do you believe it? Because there's been lots of reports that actually you're very sceptical of ring fencing and of enshrining the spending commitment in law.
I think it should be enshrined in law. At the end of the day, as a government, in terms of the laws we've passed, we've focused on shaping up the economy and improving our public finances.
So why haven't you done it?
Well, at the end of the day, we're reaching the 0.7% commitment without needing a law. And ultimately, we're going to be accountable as we would be under the law.
But
we want
will you do it or won't you?
Because we've committed to doing that.
You promised in your manifesto you would do it. You haven't yet done it. You're running out of time. Will you do it?
I certainly hope that we can find parliamentary time to do that. But even if we don't, the key thing is that we've acted as if that law's already in place and we're already meeting our 0.7% of GNI commitment on overseas development.
And if you do not believe, if you're a British voter who doesn't believe that we should enshrine that in by law, so that we have to do it, which means with a growing economy, foreign aid will rise by definition. And if you think we should be spending less money on the Ethiopian Spice Girls and the Bangladeshi Question Time, for whom should you vote at the next election?
I think as a Conservative Party we've got a very sensible approach to overseas
But if you don't agree with that, for whom should you vote?
Well, I don't know what the various party manifestos
Well, the only party that doesn't think we should be doing this is UKIP.
Well, I think each party will set out its stall at the next election, which will include policies like overseas development. But I think you have to look at the response to both the Philippines appeal that we've seen over the last week and children in need. We are a country that's massively generous, and in spite of all of the challenges we have faced and all the steps we're taking to get our country back on track, what it shows is the British people will respond to crisis and will respond to need when they see it in the world. And I think it's one of the things that makes Britain special.
Justine Greening, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.